Hey, what do you know? This is the Melvin Live Show, and thank you for being here with me. You could be anywhere in the world, but you choose to be here. And for that, I appreciate that a lot. And so today we want to talk about this topic called, or rather, this title called Content Leaders. Now, what exactly is a content leader? I mean, have you ever heard of the term before? Well, to be honest, I have never heard of the term before until today. You see, so as you probably know, I have this curation habit. And what I do every day is I want to keep up to date in terms of what are some of the happenings and what are some of the ons and going ons, in the field that I'm in. And so one key aspect of it is really for me to be on the lookout for great articles, so that I could have a better sense of what's going on. I have the pulse, I have the finger on my on the pulse itself, and I'm also able to kind of sense where the direction is going. And so, with that, what I typically do is I will read those articles, and the ones that really look like they can offer certain kind of an insight and I'm able to extract some kind of actionable advice, that's what I would do. So the perspective that I maintain is that when I look at an article, the key question I ought to ask myself is how does this benefit this person who is a one person, 1 million or digital business owner? Right. And I want to see it through the perspective of this person because that's who I am. And in that process itself, what I want to do is I want to be able to read it, distill out the insights, and then to be able to convert that into actionable advice that I can do and I can execute on that. And I would like to share with you. And that's what this whole show it's all about. So that's something that I've been doing for the last 3 weeks or so. So in case you have not subscribed to the um, newsletter, please, go ahead and go to melvin.me and make sure you sign up there. Now, if you're unsure, right, and I think rightly so. If this is the first time you're watching this channel and you come across me and you're like, well, I'm not too sure if I want to be giving you my information or having you send me anything in the inbox itself. But then take a look at the latest issue and use that as a gauge and then determine if that's something that it's going to be for you, that's going to be beneficial for you. So check that out and make the decision for yourself. So today we want to talk about this whole idea of content leaders. Now, who are these content leaders and what do they do? Now, before we get into that, let's back it up a bit and look at this whole thing, this whole phenomenon that it's going on, right? And so, this whole phenomenon that it's going on for quite some time now, and it gets and it especially gets fast tracked and magnified during the COVID-19 situation. And this whole thing, it's about content creation. So I think many of us have kind of grown numb to marketing messages. So whenever we see a marketing messages, we tend to see it with a little bit of biasness. We tend to see that this whole piece of information that it's presented in front of us is to convince us that we need this thing. So I give you an example. Recently, I was talking to a client, and the client was looking at how to create a community. And in the community itself, it's essentially how to create some kind of a reward and a loyalty program. And so we looked at a few softwares, and some of the software were like really, really basic, and some of the software are so comprehensive that you probably have certain things that you have never thought of, and they have got a module in there. And so when you look at each one of them and the way that it's being marketed, like the way that it's being written, it's very well written in such a way that you will be able to see, and you will, if you are not careful, you would be drawn to each one of them, right, for their own merits itself, until you take a step back and you kind of compare them, side by side. Then you are able to see the kind of discrepancy. And of course, every company would want to tell you that they have got these people working with them, and on and on and on. And some of the names were impressive, and some of the names are well known, right? And so you kind of have that influence, but at the same time, you also know that these people would, of course, in the marketing messages, write only things that will accentuate or bring out the pros about their product itself, and rightly so, right? So I think many of us these days have grown, like I said, many of us have grown numb to all these marketing messages, and sometimes we can even smell the BS from a mile away. And so the whole idea here is that, to instead of creating marketing messages, because obviously you're going to say great things about your product, what you want to do is you want to create content. And this content ideally should be educational. And the other thing is that some of this content, it would be better if it's created by a independent third party. So like someone who is a reviewer, who would talk about the pros and the cons of the product, for example. Or it could be a professional, right? Someone who is a sound engineer, for example, and looking into the plus and minuses of this microphone, for example. So you can't have that kind of a review. And of course, in that respect itself, we are a little bit more inclined to believe them, because we kind of know that, okay, they're speaking at it from an objective point of view, a professional point of view. And if they are being paid, if it is a paid sponsorship, then they would, according to FTC guidelines, they would have to, disclaim that, they would have to disclose that, rather, right, in the content itself. So we kind of know that, when it comes to content, content would be a useful piece of information, or a useful piece of a guide that is able to get you further along in this customer journey. So when we look at content leaders, now who are these content leaders? Well, these content leaders could come from two areas, right? So one area of content leaders could come from the brand. So the brand being that content leader, being that one who produces all this great content about how to use the product, who uses the product, and what are the best use cases for some of these products, for example, right? So a great way to look at some of these content messages is, for example, people like Nike, right? So Nike would, if you download the Nike Run Club app, right? It will actually gives you information about, injury, for example. So, like, as you know, I've been running, and one of the most painful thing to have as a runner, it's plantar fasciitis. And with that, it really knocked me out, and kind of, I couldn't be running for a couple of weeks itself. And and so with that, I needed to know, like, how am I supposed to treat this injury, and what are the things that I can do to, ensure that it doesn't deteriorate. And of course, one of the things that I would need to look into would be the shoes, right? And so when I go to Nike's app itself, it so happened, I do not know how it happens, whether it's algorithm or something else, but it so happens that, the topic about plantar fasciitis came out. And when it came out itself, of course, it was relevant to me. And then I consumed that piece of information, and that piece of information then gave me certain suggestions and what are the things that I can look out for. And of course, at the end of the day, because I use Nike running shoes, and of course, I would want to find out which is the best running shoe for someone who has got plantar fasciitis, right? So that becomes a way of, a content leader being able to produce content and being authoritative in that field itself, and to be able to provide advice, right? So that's one aspect. That's from the brand. Now, the other aspect, as I mentioned earlier on, are from the content experts. So, as an example, I've been watching this guy on YouTube. His name is Curtis Judd, if I didn't get that wrong, right? And he's a professional videographer, right? He made quite a fair bit of corporate work in terms of videography, and so, because of his experience, he was able to talk about technical details of, in terms of sound and in terms of lighting. And when he speaks about, or he makes a comparison, for example, he makes a comparison of the Zoom audio recorder, right? And he makes a comparison between the H4, the H5, the H6, for example. Um, you know, when I watch it, I tend to be influenced by his review itself, because I see it as him being genuine and being providing an objective view about what this can be used, and what is it used for, and what are the best use cases, right? And so, because of watching some of his videos, it has given me sufficient information to decide on whether to get a H4, a H5, or a H6, right? And so these are the two categories of, what we call content leaders. So one would be the brand, and the other one would be the expert. Now let's take a look at what's going on right now with regards to what we call content revolution. And by the way, whenever you hear the term revolution, on the other side of the table, it's this thing called opportunity, right? So evidently, if you look at like the Renaissance period, as well as the fourth industrial revolution, people are talking about what are some of the changes that is going on, what are some of the what are some of the systemic changes that are going on, what is some of the shift in terms of perspective, in terms of ideas, in terms of worldview that is going on, and where many of these assumptions are being challenged. Herein lies a series of challenges, and these challenges will be for people who are trying to grapple or trying to cope with the changes, either because of their mindset or their skill set. And so this would be one group of people, but of course, there will be the other group of people. And the other group of people would likely be the entrepreneurs, as well as the people who are able to look beyond the movement or the shift, and to be able to see where the opportunities lie, right? So I'm saying that whenever you hear the word revolution, you know that there is an opportunity within it. Now, if it's not obvious, then what you have to do is to search. And in order to be able to leverage that situation itself, what you really want to do is you want to make sure that you have the mindset and the skill set to be able to help you do that. So when it comes now to content revolution, I mean, just look at during the COVID-19 lockdown itself, there was a plethora of content that was being created. I would dare say that 80% of them were crap, right, or bad content. But the top 20% of content that were good were actually getting multiple times more views than the rest of the content. Okay, so if you look at, for example, a few top YouTube YouTubers, for example, you will see that some of them really have gotten away with, being able to produce quality content, and then it's also able to leverage this thing called the content revolution. Now, because of the fast pace of change that's happening right now, I mean, you and I would agree that, especially in the COVID situation, things are so fluid, things move so fast that what you thought was an assumption yesterday could be very, very well be challenged the next day. And so, in a rapid environment like this, obviously the consumer preferences and the consumers um, emphasis or their priorities would have shifted. And so, unless you are agile enough, right, to be able to produce content that it's both timely and relevant when it is being published, right? Only if you're able to do that, then of course you would be ahead of the game. And so, when it comes to this revolution itself, the thing that we have to take note is that many of the, and that's, I will preface that with the fact or the study that I gotten from this article, right? I'll link it in the show notes itself. But the point is that this revolution has resulted in these two groups of people, the brands as well as the experts, failing to keep up with the demand or failing to keep up with the requirement or the need of the consumer when it comes to creating content. So, for example, in the past, you could probably get away with producing one piece of video a month, and that would be good enough, right? But unless you are like Apple, you can probably get away with that, right? But for the rest of us, we have to be nimble, we have to be quick, we have to be agile enough to be able to produce content that are both relevant and timely. And so here today, what I would like to do is to share with you three things that you can do, and that it's going to enable you to position yourself as a content leader. And so, if as a one person, 1 million old digital business owner, one of the key things that you must leverage its content. And if you do not have content, if you are not creating what I call digital assets, then you're going to be far behind. So what are the three things that you can do when it comes to putting yourself out there and making sure that you are in the position to become a content leader? So number one, right? Number one, it's beat the algorithm. Now, what I mean by that is the following. Take note that these days, when you consume content, whether it's in the form of searches or it's in the form of social media or in the form of, news aggregator, for example, um, take note that actually what you are reading is actually suggested by the algorithm, right? So if you, for example, if you are on Facebook and you have been liking a certain kind of content, what the algorithm does is that it will then showcase more of such content to you in the next couple of times when you logged on to Facebook, right? Likewise, if you're on YouTube and you started watching a particular genre of videos, then you will see that in the homepage of your YouTube, you will see many of such videos or related videos that will be shown to you and will be introduced to you. And so that becomes an issue for two areas. Number one is that there are people who are not aware that whatever they are seeing is actually pushed by the algorithm. In other words, they could very well be influenced by what they are seeing, and and it becomes like a little echo chamber where what they believe is perpetuated by what they would see more of. And so, because what they see more of it's what they currently already believe, then hence it reinforces that belief. So they will go out and think that, yeah, this is true. This is the way it is because this is how it is, right? And that is a problem because when it comes to a situation whereby you are not aware that there is a force behind this whole process itself, then you might find yourself being sucked in or being influenced because of the algorithm, right? Of course, the best way to do this is to be first be aware of the algorithm, and secondly, to consciously opt yourself out of the algorithm. So let me give you an example. When I was on LinkedIn in 2018, after you know creating videos on LinkedIn, and I started to get lots of traction, um, inevitably, my feed starts to be filled with people I have interacted with and people content that I have expressed an interest in. And after a while, all I see all day are those kind of content. And I knew that, of course, there would be more people, there would be other kind of people who are on LinkedIn who might be creating fascinating and valuable content, but I'm just not seeing them. And so one way to beat that, instead of relying on the feed to show you what the feed thinks that you are interested, what I do is I deliberately or I consciously go into the search to look for the type of content that I'm interested in. The same with Twitter and the same with YouTube, right? So one thing that you want to do is you need to be aware of the algorithm, and once you're aware of the algorithm, is to opt out of the algorithm, right? And so it's for you to determine what are the things that you want to see rather than for the algorithm to decide for you what are the things that you should see. All right, so that's number one. And the tool that I use is that I would subscribe to the type of newsletter that I am in areas that I'm interested in. So it goes from things as obscure as like for instance, ed tech, right? For me, it's obscure because it's not an area that I am actively looking at, right? I would even look at the early childhood education, for example. So, there is a bunch of things that I'm interested in, and I just want to read things from different fields and different genres, and I do not necessarily have the kind of contact on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter of people in those fields. So I would probably not see very much content of that. And so what I do is I would deliberately go to those areas and subscribe to the newsletter if they have one. And if not, what I would do is I would actually, go into the searches to search for such content, right? And so that's something that you can do. And as I mentioned, if you are interested in building this one person, 1 million all digital business, then definitely you want to subscribe to my newsletter, because what I do is I view every piece of content, and I beat the algorithm, right? I view every piece of content through the eyes of this business owner, right? Because that's what I'm doing, right? I see it through the eyes of that business owner. And the question I ask myself is, what are the insights that I could distill from this? And then what are some of the actionable item that I could put down, that I could do? And then I share that with you, right? So I write this weekly newsletter. I also write daily, but if if daily is too much, then go ahead and subscribe to the weekly newsletter itself. So number one, beat the algorithm. Number two, it's you have to go beyond just reading the article. And what I mean by that is that you actually have to dig deep into thinking about what is this article trying to tell us. So the three key questions that I would always ask myself is number one, is this thing that is being presented, is it true? Right? Could it be true? Okay. It's not so much about challenging its validity, but it's more of could this thing that it's being shared with me, could it be true? Right? Could it be true? So, for example, today I was reading about a startup who has gone through bootstrapping and what went wrong with them bootstrapping at the early stage, right? And so, because of that bad decision itself, uh, that caused the startup to fail. And so, the question that came to mind was that so is it true that if you are starting, if you are looking at starting a startup, you definitely need to seek external investors' money in order for you to kind of springboard and to grow fairly quickly. So I would ask myself that question. And of course, sometimes what the article is presenting, it could be true, but on other times, that article is probably just giving you a different perspective. And so the next question I ask myself is, if it is true, how can this help me challenge my own assumptions? Right? Because I have my assumptions, and my assumptions are not always right. Right? And the thing that I'm working towards is becoming less wrong than being more right. Right? Huge difference, um, but it sounds so similar. So I want to get less wrong. And by being less wrong, it means that I would have to peep into other people's perspective and say that why did this person come up with this worldview itself? And how can I accept this worldview and challenge my own assumption? And of course, the third thing is once I'm able to answer that question, the next thing is to be able to say, aha, these are the insights that I've gained that are, through my own experience, through my own environment, through my own educational background, I wouldn't have been able to gain or to be able to develop that kind of insight. So through reading this is what some of the insights that I can gain from it. And then of course the next part is then to look at how to convert that into actionable items, right? So number two is deep thinking, and number three, it's if in case you haven't suspect this coming, number three, to be a content leader, I certainly advocate this idea about live streaming. Now, why live streaming? Because many a times when it comes to recording videos, I think people can do quite a fairly good job at it, right? It can be really polished, and sometimes it can be really great to watch, both for entertainment as well as for information um, value itself. You can see the green part here. So I need to do something to the lighting because it's kind of like making me looks like Grinch. Anyways, so live streaming, and I kind of think that for someone like me who doesn't have a huge amount of time, recording videos and then editing them. I mean, I've done that, right? I've done that when we were traveling. I've done that. I have filmed everything, throughout the day, and then in the evening itself, basically, is to sit down and to go through the footage, and then pick up, the relevant footage, and to be able to combine that into a story, and make that into a video itself. And for that, I take like at least 2 hours to go through that process. And I can tell you, it's painful, But it's satisfying to see the end results. Now the thing is that I just do not have the time and the energy to be able to do all that, right? I'm not able to vlog. I mean, that's not my kind of thing. At least not now. At least when I was traveling, that was something that I was doing. But right now, when I'm back here, and with the environment here, it's going to be totally different. So what I see is that I do not have time to sit down and make the videos and then edit that, spend 2 3 hours to edit the video itself. Sure, I can come up with a very polished video itself, but the other thing I need to ask myself is it going to be timely and is it going to be relevant? And so what I've done is I opted for the route of using live streaming because I believe that live streaming is extremely difficult. You have to be able to talk about a particular topic, and you want to be able to talk about it in depth, and you want to be able to do it live, right? Not many people would be able to do this live, but if you can, and if you continue to try and thrive in this aspect itself, you will then become a content leader. So if you want to learn how to, create the live stream and how to set up your studio and what are the gear that you need for live streaming, make sure you leave a comment below and I'll be more than glad to share with you what are the gears and what are the gear and the tools that I use for live streaming. And in fact, that's one of the catalytic courses that I will be conducting going forward. And so if you haven't checked out, make sure you checked it out, or at least leave a comment and say catalytic courses in the comment, and I'll be sure to reach out to you when the course go live. All right. And so with that, thank you so much for watching. And once again, if you have not already, um, you know, subscribed to this channel, make sure you subscribe to this channel. What the hell are you waiting for? Right. And if you have, then make sure you go ahead and like this video so that it will help people like you discover this video. And it absolutely makes my day. All right. And so with that, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.